Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 221, Lysis 211e to 212a. The conversation so far hasn't been all that philosophical, and it doesn't promise to get any better anytime soon. Lysis has asked Socrates to beat Menexenus, his friend, in an eristic debate. And as I have said previously, a good eristician would start the debate before the debate by making the audience turn against his opponent even before the first argument. Socrates, however, is a good eristician in that he knows the eristic techniques, but he's a bad eristician in that he doesn't want the end goal of eristics, which is to beat anyone. There's no point beating an opponent. If you're a philosopher, you want your interlocutor to understand things. You ask questions in order to make them think through things and come to some new conclusions. An eristician just wants the audience to laugh at his opponent. Socrates then doesn't laugh at Menexenus. He has already pointed out that Menexenus is in the company of his teacher, as it were, Ctesippus, his cousin, who we know has learnt eristic techniques from simply listening to two old men, and we know this from the dialogue Euthydemus. We shouldn't really mix dialogues together, but in this case there seems to be an obvious dramatic reference, because Ctesippus is an aristocrat. He is not an eristician. He has not learnt to be an eristician. Socrates pointing out that he is up against the great Ctesippus and Menexenus together would be his way of trying to turn the audience against them. This will suffice. He is not going to be rude. He's not going to laugh at his opponents, but he can gain some sympathy, but he doesn't actually, even Lysis doesn't sympathize with him, by pretending to be less good at eristics than Menexenus and his great teacher Ctesippus. Actually, a good eristician wouldn't have simply whispered all of this to Lysis. He would have wanted the audience to hear as well. In my opinion, this is all for the benefit of Socrates' current audience, the person who is listening to the entire account of the conversation with Lysis. He would expect some eristic preparation before the argument, and this may do. Socrates then begins the argument, but he doesn't begin with an eristic question, which is what we might have expected. An eristic question would be of the sort, are you A or B? Two extremes with no middle, and the opponent would have to choose either A or B, and would be refuted because the two extremes simply are easy to refute. Instead of asking an eristic question, Socrates starts by saying that we all like to acquire and possess some sort of thing or another. Some people want to acquire and possess dogs or money, but he likes to acquire or possess friends. And not only that, he says that he's quite erotic about it. Now, what does erotic mean? He is someone pertaining to eros. Eros is desire. So in other words, he's saying he's quite desirous of possessing friends. It would have been easier even in Greek, to say that he desires friends. But then he would have used the verb epithumeo, as he did when he said that some people desire to possess horses or dogs or money or gold or honors or high offices. And here, obviously, Plato wants philos and eros to be connected verbally, which is to make us consider the connections between the various characters, one of whom represents eros, and that is hypothales, while one or more characters represent philia. With that in mind, we'll carry on with Socrates' introduction to his eristic debate, if there will be one at all. Kai puloimen an moi philon agathon genestai, malon eton ariston en anthropois ortiga e electroona, kai nai ma dia egoge, malon e hypontekai kuna, oimai de neton kuna, malon eto dareu chrysion ktesastai dexaimen polyproteron hetairon, malon de e auton dareon, hutos ego philetai rostis emi. And I would want to have a good friend rather than the best quail among humans, or the best rooster. And by Zeus, I, for my part, would rather have a good friend than a horse and a dog. And by the dog, I think I would rather accept to possess by far a companion rather than the gold of Darius, or even than Darius himself. That's how companion-loving I am. Socrates is not yet using eristics, but he is using some rhetorical techniques. One of them is in his attempt to show the value he puts on companionship or friendship. He uses two words. Philos is a friend, hetairos, a companion. He would rather possess a friend than, and then we have a list of things he would rather not possess compared to a friend, and he begins with quails and roosters, which seem to be of little value, and above them he puts a horse and a dog. Now, we might think that a dog isn't particularly valuable, but a horse and a dog are symbols of the aristocracy, in particular in hunting. The quail is something hunted, and a rooster is not particularly associated with the upper class. No one would argue with the idea that above these in value is the wealth of Darius, the king of Persia. It is a bit strange that above the wealth of Darius, Socrates puts Darius himself. If any of the Persian royalty were considered a good friend, that title would have to go to Cyrus, the brother of Artaxerxes, who became the king of Persia. Artaxerxes became the king of Persia after the death of King Darius. I don't know which King Darius this one refers to, but it's strange that Socrates puts anyone after the entire wealth of a Persian king, especially if the Persian king he names was supposed to be a great friend, because he's saying even a great friend like Darius isn't good enough for me, I still want a companion, which doesn't make sense at all. Plato seems to have invented the term philetairos here, a lover of a hetairos. He puts together philos and hetairos in one word, friend and companion, to create the term companion lover. Since Socrates is making a great issue about philos on the one hand and heteros on the other, I'm not sure whether he's distinguishing them or conflating them into one idea, but we should be aware that philos involves philia, which is friendship or love, the sort of love you have in a friendship, while a heteros, a companion, is simply someone who shares the same lifestyle or situation, such as soldiers who share a tent. Heteroi, companions, don't need to have the bond of philia. If there is such a bond, they can add the term philos to heteros, O dear companion. More could be said on this, but we'll just carry on for now. Humas un horon sete kai lysin, ek peplegmai kai eudaimonidzo hoti huto neoi, ontes hoioit eston tuto toktema tachi kai radius ktastai. Seeing you, then, both you and Lysis, I am struck, and I consider you fortunate that, being so young, you two are both able to acquire this acquisition swiftly and easily. Kai sute tuton huto philon ekteso tachite kai sfodra, kai al hutos se. And both you have acquired this person as a friend so swiftly and intensely. And again, this person has acquired you. It's an interesting idea that Lysis and Menexenus have acquired each other as friends. Ego de huto poro e mi tuk tematos, hoste ud hontina tropon gignetai philos heteros heteru oida. But I am so far from the acquisition that I don't know at all in what way a friend becomes a friend of someone else. Ala tauta de auta se pulomai erestai hate emperon. But I wish to ask you about these very things, since you are experienced. So Socrates has set Menexenus up as the expert in being a friend, because he is a friend to Lysis, while Socrates really wants to know what a friend is, because he isn't a friend to anyone, he doesn't have friends. An eristic debate is looking more and more remote.